Welcome to Indian Time. This is the which is the storytelling month. This is the time of the year where many years ago when all the gathering and hunting was starting to slow down, and one of the main events of the elders was storytelling. This is a time where a lot of the morals and values and the education was passed down to the younger, to the children. Most of the elders would have the honors of doing this, and normally it's stories, creation stories, or coyote stories, whatever you call them, were never told until the first snow of the year. And then you could tell these stories until the first thunder in the spring, then you put your stories away. Mainly because this is a period of time where a lot of the activities slow down as far as gathering food and plants, and hopefully you've gathered enough throughout the year to kind of settle back in the wintertime and enjoy a quiet and educational time of the year. The place name for this show is Skumtsene or Skumtene, depending on which one you want to use. This is in the Big Hole area. Skumtsene is referring to the small ground squirrel. Along this Skumtene, according to some of our elder stories, Pete Beaverhead said that along this river, which means Skumtsene means or they're packing or they're storing food. I guess a long time ago, some people seeing these ground squirrels were storing their food along the river there, so they called it Skumtsene. And so from that time on, people knew where Skumtsene was at. So that's the place name for this show, and the animal is Mahuya, which is the raccoon. Mahuya. Raccoon is a animal that is very wise, very smart, and it's a lot of the people today look to it as for its cunning ways and how smart it is by washing its food and those kinds of things. So Mahuya is the plant, or excuse me, the animal. The plant is husks. That's lovage. Again, husks. You hear a lot of people saying husk, and that is not right. Husk is something referring to the ear of corn, or part of the corn. So there's a difference. If you say husk, I'm going to think you're talking about the part of the corn. Husks is lovage. That is a plant, a root that they dig. It's up in the higher elevations where it's damp, and you get it and you dry it. A lot of people use it for sore throats. Sometimes they make a tea out of it for colds. A lot of today's drummers and singers like to put a little chunk of that in their mouth, and as they sing it, it helps them, helps their voice, losing their voice from singing throughout the night. So husks has a lot of uses, and it's still used by a lot of people today. Some of the things that has taken place in November, back in time, on the 9th of November 1908, in Kutlehunsu, or Sam Resurrection, Moodleman, Kikishi, and Jackson Sundown left for Washington, D.C. to protest the opening of the reservation and a lot of other issues that was happening on that time. On the 10th of November in 1853, Gabriel Prudhomme was appointed tribal interpreter. A lot of interpreters played a big role, big part of the time, the treaties and trappers and traders. And a lot of people say some of the treaters, interpreters, made some mistakes in some of the things that took place. On the 14th of November in 1871, President Grant issued an executive order for the removal of the Salish from the Bitterroot to the Flathead Reservation. On the 15th in 1909, again in Sam Resurrection, wrote to President Teddy Roosevelt protesting the opening of the reservation. He was worked hard when he was part of the reservation back then. Sam Resurrection fought and wrote letters, went to D.C. many times and protested opening the reservation. On the 16th of November in 1809, David Thompson established the Kalispell House, or Kalispell House, which was the first trading post in this area. Those are some of the things that took place back in history in November. Also, coming up soon will be Thanksgiving. I hope everyone has a good dinner and a safe one. Our elders meeting, remember, is on the first Wednesday of each month. So the next one will be in December. So those of you that are interested in speaking and listening to the elders, first Wednesday of the month. Today, I have, excuse me, today I have Joyce Silverthorne with me from the Tribal Education Department, who is here to talk a little bit about her program, explain a bit how it works and some of the mission statement, the objectives of our goals of some of what's going on in tribal education. So with that, I'll go ahead and let Joyce let us know what's going on over at Tribal Ed.
Hi, Tony.
And how are you?
It's good to be here.
Good.
The Tribal Education Department is kind of an odd man out in the education world. We don't have any authority over any education programs, and we are an arm of the Tribal Council in dealing with education issues for the tribal membership.
When was the Education Department established, do you know?
As it stands now, it was established in 1994 when the compacts were done.
Okay, so what are some of the goals, I guess, of the Education Department, and what does your program hope to accomplish for the tribes in the coming years?
The mission states that the Education Department is to promote, support, and respect quality education through education leadership, curriculum development, higher education opportunities, and community empowerment. And what we do is to have a number of folks that help us work with those different areas. We have a higher education scholarship person, and those are compacted Bureau of Indian Affairs funds, and it is the implementation of scholarships. And Penny Kipp is our scholarship officer.
So what kind of funding do you receive for this program? Is there, I know there's a lot of students that apply for some help there.
There certainly are, and there's getting to be more and more of them. We had 168 students who applied by the deadline this past year, which is twice what we had the year before. And we have a number of them who stay in school, who are doing well, and so our costs have greatly increased. That money comes from a combination of places. We have the compacted Bureau of Indian Affairs funding, and then we have dollars from the Tribal Council itself. And the tribe supports us almost twice what we receive from Bureau of Indian Affairs. So we have very good support from the tribes.
Yeah. What are the qualifications for the students applying for help through the Tribal Ed program?
For higher ed, it's tribal membership. We also work with, there isn't a lot of other requirements. We have taken a number of people that are in financial need, and based on financial need, everyone has to submit an application for higher education, financial aid, and based on what that return is, then the amount is determined from the school, what the costs will be, if there are any other fundings that they receive, and then an unmet need, and the unmet need is then where we come in. And we fund up to $6,000 in unmet need. We've also been able to assist some tribal members that are not in financial aid need, and we help with tuition, books, and fees.
So then most of the students that you help are around here, around?
They're all over the country.
All over.
Most of them are here. Our largest percentage are here at SKC. We have quite a few at the University of Montana. And then there are a number of folks that are in schools in Washington. The state of Washington has a in-state tuition costs for tribal members, which is real helpful.
Yeah. So what is the difference in tuition costs now from state to state?
It can vary a great deal. It depends on what the school has negotiated with the federal government as far as their budgets are. In times of tightening dollars within the state, tuition costs have gone up. We received tuition increases as late as August this year. And so it's hard to tell you what an amount actually is. I can tell you that they're negotiated for single students, for couples, for a person with dependents, and so there are different budgets that are built based on the needs of the student.
So based on tuition costs between, from state to state, I imagine if the tuition here in this state is less than others, then you get more students, I suppose, applying for some help in the state? Or does that matter?
We don't pay out-of-state tuition costs. We would pay equivalent of what it would be in-state. And so that is part of the decision-making that the student has to do. There may be a program they would like to take someplace else, but if we're only able to help up into in-state costs here, then they have to find other financial aid to make up the difference.
I see. So that would cause some problems then for
that
some of the students.
That would influence the choices.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea what the enrollment now is here on the reservation at the SKC and the university, those two schools that involve our tribal membership?
We should have Penny here, but I can tell you it's probably about maybe 60% of those that we fund are between these two schools, maybe higher than that even.
Wow.
That's a guess, but the biggest proportion are here.
That's still pretty good. Okay.
It helps to go local and get a good foundation and then transfer.
What kind of other plans does your program doing trying to help meet the needs of the education of the students here?
We're trying to look at a lot of different issues. In addition to higher education issues that will continue to plague us, we need to fill positions that with our high demand where we're unable to get tribal membership. And so we have contacted personnel and have a list now trying to look at how that can be better served. We also need to look at targeted fields. Technology is getting greater and our demands are more. The engineers, the hydrologists, we have some very high-tech demands within the tribes as we begin to look at taking over the dams. There will be more needs. We're on the front of a lot of different issues, and so that places demand on our personnel. In addition to that, we also are working with K-12 issues and trying to bring up the graduation rate trying to make sure that there are more people that are actually in that pipeline going to higher education. There are a number of different programs within the area, Talent Search, Upward Bound, GATE scholarships, that are trying to target primarily low-income families and encourage them to look at higher education as an option.
Okay. Okay, with that, we'll take a short break here and we'll come right back.
In the past, people were raised with respect for each other and the role of sex in Indian society. Today, the consequences of sexual behavior can be serious. They can even kill you. Please know the facts. Be safe. The family is everything. HIV/AIDS is preventable. This is real life, and it has real consequences.
Welcome back to Indian Time. Today, the show I have with me is Joyce Silverthorne from the Tribal Ed Department, and I have a few more questions for Joyce. One of those mainly because we depend a lot today anymore on education. It's a big part of our lives, no matter what you do, where you go, what you're going to do in your life. Education is a big part. Education is important, even to some of those parents that never had the opportunity for education, are looking to some sort of field to get more education. So it's nice to know that education is available no matter where you go. SKC here on the reservation, it plays it's not the traditional kind of a college. It educates all kinds of people from all over the place. One of the questions that I have, because education is at many different levels in communities, high school, grade school, middle school, it's all important, and we have people involved in many areas that make it a success for our children. One of the questions, Joyce, is that what are the Indian Ed committees that we have here on the reservation? What role do they play?
Indian Ed committees are some of the longest standing education entities our people have been involved in. And they began with the Johnson O'Malley funding of 1934, and it required that the parents have a say in how those dollars would be spent in the school system. And with that, as the dollars were larger, that played an important role. That was how we began to have cultural activities that came into schools. In the early days, some of those activities were completely outside, and so the parents completely controlled the money and were able to determine what it was they wanted to be done. As the schools became more receptive, it became more of an involvement of the schools in the process. These are handled through the Bureau of Indian Affairs. They come directly to the tribe and then are distributed to the schools. And these now have, I think at the last year we were able to offer $71 per Johnson O'Malley qualified child. And the hard part about all of the funding issues is that these are determined by degree of blood, by the enrollment status of the child and the parents. And so sometimes it gets kind of technical. But the good thing is that it allows us to do some things in the schools we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. The Johnson O'Malley Indian Ed committees used to be just for Johnson O'Malley funding. As we continued to work with the school systems, we began getting involved with the Department of Ed funding under the it's been Title IV, Title V, Title IX. It's now Title VII. It's Title VII of the No Child Left Behind Act. And Indian education is funded in an entitlement process directly to the schools. And those dollars now are determined by the count in the school, and they count back to second generation. So if a child self-identifies and can claim an enrolled member at least within 2 generations, then they qualify for Title VII funding. And that's a difference from JOM, which was quarter degree or enrolled. So now we have 2 sources of funding where Indian Ed parents are very important parts. They play a role in the needs assessment, in the development of programs, and in monitoring and keeping the school informed of what they need. The third reason that the Indian Ed committees are involved comes from a land-based program called Impact Aid. Impact Aid is dollars in lieu of taxes. And so every place that has trust properties, that would include the national parks, the utilities, there are a number of reasons for trust properties. It also includes Indian lands. And for this reservation, it includes any trust property by the tribes, by individuals. It also includes the bison range, Bonneville Power. There are some isolated places where there are property where people may live on too. So people who would not be paying taxes for those properties, which is how schools generate dollars. And so in lieu of taxes, they receive impact aid. Impact aid on a reservation where there is a majority of trust property requires equal participation for children. And so there is a monitoring responsibility for the committee to look at how those dollars are serving their children, and are their children represented throughout the school. Are there children in gifted and talented, in speech and debate, in the sports programs? Are they actually participating in the full school experience? And so the Indian Ed committees are an important piece of how we monitor that, how we get it done, how we keep in touch with the school. In years past, it was almost an adversarial relationship. That's improving. That's improving because parents are learning more about how they can be involved and what kind of a role they have, and how that responsibility works with the school. And our school people are becoming more aware of what parents can do and what they can offer in the school. It's a slow process to change, but I think it's beginning.
So how was it, you mentioned again, how was it determined how many dollars you get per student? How is that determined?
Each one of those programs determines in a different way. For the Johnson O'Malley, it's Bureau of Indian Affairs dollars, and they send to us every year since 1994 the same amount. So they haven't increased, even though our numbers have increased. And so it's been frozen at a level.
So it was supposed to be based on the number of students,
right,
on the count, but,
right,
but they've been sending the same.
Right, and so that makes a program that probably is not keeping up with time. In other words, it's decreasing dollars. The Title VII is actually generated on an entitlement basis. When all of the applications go into Washington, D.C. to the Department of Ed, then they determine how much they are going to allow for each student under the applications. And that has stayed level and gone up minimally. But there was a slight jump a year ago, and so we have a better handle on that improving with the numbers of students. For Impact Aid is the most lucrative of the 3 different kinds of dollars that are generated for Indian children. And that one is approximately what a state would offer or receive, a school would receive from the state.
And where does that money come from?
Federal government. It's in lieu of taxes.
That
so
just
it's
replaces,
the
so depending on what the
responsibility.
taxes are?
Yes, the responsibility of the federal government for trust property. Those are federal lands.
So depending on the size of land lost, I guess, in trust as far as taxes, that would up the dollars that you receive.
Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to this, all of this? You know, it's hard for a lot of the people to understand the differences in the different programs.
It
I
is.
guess, and how you qualify and who qualifies.
The important thing is if you care about your child's education, then anybody who is interested is able to attend and participate in an Indian Education Committee. Voting membership may be limited for some things, but for the most part they function very similar to what a PTA used to do. We see fewer PTAs anymore, and yet we still have that need to have the community communicate with the school. And so we need to look at participation in a more broad sense. We need to have people involved in order to make good decisions. It's not, it's easy to sit back and say, why didn't they do something that you'd like to have done? When in fact, if you were there to voice that opinion, it's a good chance you can have something done to your liking.
So what is the participation like now with parents? Is it getting any better, or?
We struggle with participation, always. We always would want more than what we have. Unfortunately, it tends to be a few committed people, and they may or may not make the decisions you would like. And so we need to keep expanding that. We need more people involved. We also need to recognize there are a lot of ways that parents do get involved that may not be counted when we talk about Indian Education Committees. And we have a lot of sports parents. If we could count everyone who attended the sports games as Indian education involvement, our counts would look better.
I believe it would. Well, Joyce, thank you. We're just about out of time again, but we are going to get we're going to have Joyce here for the next couple of shows, hopefully, to update us on all the different aspects of education, the role of tribal ed, parent committees, all of those things that we hope to clarify on the shows and next couple of shows. If you have any questions or ideas of what you would like to see or what you'd like answered, yeah, you might want to call Joyce's office here at the tribal complex and ask her those questions, and then we'll hopefully maybe we can answer those on a future show. With that, we're out of time. I'd like to say I hope to see you next time. Have a great holiday.
Mm-hmm.